Okay. In this video, we would like to talk about how the secregogues. What means secregog? Secregog means the substance which can induce fluid secretion. In these slides, we have three secregogues. The first is acetylcholine, which is released from the vagus nerve or indirect nervous systems. Another one is histamine, which is released from E cells. And the last one is gastrin, which is released from G cells, but is not in the corpus, a body of stomach. G cell released gastrin actually from entrance of stomach. Okay, let's see how these three secregogues coordinately work together to induce acid secretion from parietal cells. Okay, actually, for these three secregogues, there are two ways. One we call the direct ways. Direct ways means these three secregogues all bind the receptors on the parietal cells, eventually induce the parietal cell to release acid. Okay, let's see one by one. Once the vagus nerve and enteric nervous system has been activated, they will release acetylcholine bound on the receptors on parietal cells we call M3 receptors. Actually, in muscarinic receptors, also the gastrin released from G cell and eventually released to the circulation system and also act on the parietal cells, bind on the CCKB receptors. The CCKB, the CCK means choline-16 kinase, actually is a hormone which is released from the small intestine. CCK is involved in contraction of the gallbladders. Also, the histamine released from the E cells will migrate or eventually will bind on the H2 receptors via paracrine pathway. Once histamine binds on H2 receptors, they will activate signaling pathway, eventually induce the activation of the protein pump and lead to the parietal cells to secrete acid. Okay, this several ways we call it the secregog. Induce the gastric acid secretion by the direct pathway, which means they all bind on the receptors in the parietal cells. Also, for the vagus nerve and the gastrin, they have indirect pathway. This means the gastrin released from the G cell into the circulation system, eventually act on E cell cells by binding on the gastrin receptors is CCKB, and also acetylcholine will bind on the M3 receptors to induce E cells to release histamine. Then histamine released from E cell will bind on H2 receptors to stimulate the parietal cells to acid secretion. Okay, so for historical background, actually people always argue and argue again whether the histamine is the common mediator or for acid secretion, or just a potential aider for acetylcholine and gastrin induced acid secretion. Okay, now physiologists actually use the histamine 2 receptor antagonist, for example, cimetidine, to do the experiments. Based on the final experiments, they suggesting that histamine, one of the secregogue for induced acid secretion, play a major role to induce parietal cell, which release acid from the parietal cells. Then people will ask, what is the most important for these three secret gods? We can say everyone is important, but we can make a conclusion as without histamine, the effect of acetylcholine and gastrin on gastric acid secretion from the parietal cell is quite weak. So we believe the histamine play a major role in acid secretion. Okay, but people need to think about it. Eventually, the acid secretion will increase, but at some point, the acid secretion cannot go forever, also needed to stop. What kind of mechanism? Actually, in the corpus or body of stomach, we have the D cell. So B cell, and in some circumstance, it will release polypeptide we call somatostatin. Actually, the somatostatin will bind on the receptors on the parietal cells to inhibit histamine-induced acid secretion. So, what I want to say again, at some circumstance, D cell will be activated, and the D cell will release one of the polypeptide we call somatostatin. The somatostatin will bind on the receptors on the parietal cells to inhibit histamine-induced acid secretion. Okay, that means the D cell has the inhibitory mechanism for down-regulation of parietal cells to induce gastric acid secretion. Okay, let's put all this together. In the corpus or body of the stomach, there is three secret gods: acetylcholine released from the vagus or enteroanal system, gastrin from circulation system, which is released from G cell at entrance of stomach, and also histamine, which is released from ECL cells. They all can bind on their respective receptor on the parietal cells to induce acid from parietal cells. However, we also have the inhibitory mechanism in the corpus body of the stomach, which is D cells. And in some circumstance, D cell will release somatostatin bind on the receptor on parietal cells, eventually will shut off parietal cells to secrete acid from the parietal cells. Okay, thank you so much. See you next time.